welcome to this special edition of Making Sense, the news program that brings you the news perspective of the important news of the day. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming former Prime Minister, Mr. Abhisit Vejjajiva, who will be discussing the roles of the judiciary and the military coup, as well as sharing his thoughts on the implications of the coup. So I'd like to welcome you to the program. First of all, I'd like to make reference to the interview that you gave to the media recently about the judiciary role and the coup d'etat. And you said something to the effect of the judicial or the judiciary should have a role or should have the ability to refuse to acknowledge the laws or regulations or orders that were issued by the coup. Would you mind elaborating on that?
I was actually on a panel to commemorate the 30th anniversary of Black May, May of 1992 events. And one of the questions that was put to all panelists was, how can we prevent another coup which has led to conflicts and damages to the country? And my point was, first of all, that coups become addictive for a number of countries for political and legal reasons. For political reasons in that as they are carried out regularly, they become almost like one possible mechanism for political change. And you could see that the last two coups here in Thailand, when they were carried out, the country sort of had a sense of relief because they could not see any other way of dealing with the impasse that was happening before the coup. To prevent another coup, obviously we need to have the right political conditions, starting from a good democratic constitution that the people feel they need to protect, and then to make sure that all the players within the system play by the rules and recognize that they should only be thinking of constitutional change. But that's only half the story, because the legal side is that in the past coups were successful because once they were carried out, the judiciary at one point or another gives a stamp of approval that they have successfully torn up the previous constitution and have issued new laws in the form of orders or whatever they used at the time. And the only way you can stop this cycle is if once a coup happens and say there is a resistance, eventually the judiciary is then asked to rule on whether enforcing the laws by the coup makers is possible. And if they make a break with the previous or the current precedent that is being set, then that puts us in a completely new situation where resistance and unwinding a coup might become possible. And I think it was pointed out in the panel at the time that there are signs that this can be done. For instance, in 1991, when there was a coup and the coup leaders seized the assets of politicians, eventually the Supreme Court ruled that they couldn't do that. It wasn't within their power. So again, that's an example of the kind of ruling that might then make coups more difficult. And I think in recent rulings, in the Constitutional Court, maybe even also in the Admin Court, there are still minority views, but there have been views expressed by minority judges that say that some of the orders of the coup makers are not legitimate, are not legal.
Right. So you're talking about the courts of justice in general, or just specific courts like the Constitutional Court, which seems to be the final authority interpreting.
Because the judiciary cannot really initiate things, it obviously depends on the course of action.
Right.
So we might conceive of a situation where a coup is taking place. The coup leaders give out orders, maybe asking people to do things like report to them, or not to do things like political gathering. There is then resistance, so they get taken to court, whichever is the appropriate court. And that court might be the one that makes this ruling and say, no, they still have the right to political gathering. No, they don't have to report to the coup leaders because the coup is not legal. That's the kind of process, I think, that we are conceiving when we say that the judiciary might be part of a process that, if we want to try to unwind a coup and put an end to the cycle.
Yes, but that then triggers curiosity from some quarters that if there is this term which generally, basically,
sovereign power, that they've gained sovereign.
Makers are the law. So how do you think it is conceivable?
Well, if there's a challenge to it, okay, and that challenge is then taken up by the judiciary, that perhaps decide that they will side with the resistance. Otherwise, legally, I cannot see how you can prevent or unwind coups. All this is not to say it's going to be easy. It would certainly take a lot of courage from all sides to do it.
So you think the judiciary is the last resort to undo the remnants, or
I wouldn't put it as a last resort, but I would say that they would be a necessary part of any efforts to try to nullify a coup. Because without them, they will have the coup leaders will have that legitimacy and that claim to sovereign power.
Right. And where do you think countries' democratization is going from here? Do you think there will be another coup?
We hope not, but we're still stuck in a situation where our constitution is not democratic by international standards. There is a desire from a lot of people to want to amend, if not rewrite the constitution to a democratic one through a democratic process. We are still trapped in a polarized, very polarized political environment. Not just the old color codes, but now generational differences as well. So there is a huge challenge for Thai politics moving forward. How we heal these divisions, how we get into place a new democratic constitution that is accepted by both sides, and lay the foundations for a sustainable democracy not subject to coups, and how we might even design ways and conceive of possible paths to resist coups.
But the Constitution was passed, this current one, was passed in a referendum, so it could be claimed, could it, that the majority of the people embraced this Constitution. So, what's so undemocratic about that?
The first thing to say is a constitution that passes a referendum doesn't mean it cannot be amended or be rewritten if it is done through a constitutional process.
Right.
And it is allowed. The current constitution does allow for amendments and also rewrite of the constitution subject to referendums and so on. The second point that I would make is the referendum that we had was not really held in a democratic environment. People were not really allowed to campaign for and against and explain the reasons why they are voting for or against the draft constitution at the time. And also, I think a number of people who voted for in the referendum simply wanted the country to move forward towards an election, in the hope that if there were good reasons to amend the constitution, it could then be done.
Right. One last question. When do you think you will ever return to active politics?
I don't really know. I'm still very much interested in politics. It's my passion. I have a lot of concerns about the country. I want to see the country clear and new directions in dealing with the challenges of our times and also of the next generation's agenda. And but the current political environment is not one where I feel I can help really forward the kind of agenda I want to. So I guess it's a matter of further changes down the line. Because if I were to get back into politics, I mean, I wouldn't just get back for the sake of being back. I would only get back if I feel I can make a difference and push for the changes that I would like to see.
Right. Okay. To that note, we would like to thank you, Mr. Abhisit, for talking to us in today's program. Thank you. So, before we leave today, if you like today's edition, please like us, subscribe to us, and hit that notification button. And until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.